for joining us for another installment of Lackawanna Pastimes. Today we'll be joined by one of our favorite presenters, George Gula. George is a longtime volunteer and member of the Historical Society, and he's also a volunteer at the Pennsylvania Trolley Museum out in Pittsburgh. If you haven't seen George's other programs that he's done for our Lackawanna Pastime series, they're available on our YouTube channel. George did a program initially on the history of the electric trolley system in Scranton, and then did a photo tour of the Laurel line a few months later that's been very popular. So if you have a chance, please check them out on our YouTube channel. Today, George will be speaking about the history of the Northern Electric trolley system that ran through the Abingtons. So George, I will turn it over to you for a photo tour of the Northern Electric.
We always talk about trolleys in Scranton, and everybody knows about the Laurel line, and everybody certainly knows about Scranton Railway, which actually began the trolley era in 1886. And, you know, this is one of those unknown operations that went away about 1932. So for the most part, it's beyond everybody's memory. And I've got all kinds of people in here and places and things, and the Lackawanna Historical Society is there because you have helped me. And we're going to start with this big, massive map. Don't worry, just don't worry about it. But, the electric railway era, this is just northeastern PA. And can anybody see my mouse moving? No, my mouse isn't.
No, I don't see a mouse, George.
Okay, that's too bad. Unfortunately, I can't see it either, so I don't know. It's a Zoom thing. But if you kind of look at the map then on the left, you're going to see from Scranton to Wilkes-Barre and go up to Forest City and Vandling and Carbondale. We had electric railways running up there. Yeah, they ran all the way down to Pittston. The Scranton cars did connect with the Wilkes-Barre cars in Pittston. From Pittston all the way down into Nanticoke and out. You can see that red line kind of going up Harvey's Lake. And then the lines on the eastern side of the Susquehanna, that was Wilkes-Barre Railways. And coming out of Wilkes-Barre was a system called the Wilkes-Barre and Hazleton. You can see that on the right-hand map, sort of a funny pink color. And that will run into Hazleton. And there were local trolley lines in Hazleton, and I always considered that. And they were all pretty much there when the Northern Electric was conceived. If you look coming out of Scranton, the line that kind of heads up to what's called Tiffany Junction, don't believe it ever went to Montrose, never made it in there. The dotted line that was supposed to go to Binghamton, the little branch going over to Lake Winola, that's what we're going to talk about, the Northern Electric. We'll use this off-use picture first because we actually here in northeastern PA really started the electric railway era. November 29th, 1886, here was Sturgis's operation, Green Ridge Suburban Car, whose first operation was just about a 5-block test run downtown. And that's the cathedral in the back there, so you know where you are, Wyoming and Spruce. But that really starts it all. And here's one of Marianne's beautiful photos, the Dunmore car with the DM. I give this sometimes to other people that really don't know anything about Scranton other than the office, which really has nothing to do with it. But in Lackawanna County, and it was the largest city. It had lots of entertainment venues, lots of wonderful shopping venues. It was the seat of government. And Sarah, I guess since we talked about some of this last week, I guess I'm looking to the red light district too. Well known throughout the East. And I'm sure some people came on to Northern Electric to experience that. But people don't know, except for you guys, we had a major steel mill. Lackawanna Iron and Steel was the largest steel mill outside of the U.S. Steel group. We had lots of lace and manufacturing companies, and there's the diamond breaker, which is anthracite, which of course is our major industry. Now, that's fine for the people living in the grimy Lackawanna Valley. Northwest of Scranton, we go through Leggett's Gap now, and this is what it looked like. It was beautiful farming country. There were plenty of people up there. The Delaware, Lackawanna, and Western had already, of course, put their railroad through there, and even ran some local trains, stopped at Clark Summit. But they always just fought to get the coal out of the valley. And this was also a place affluent Scrantonians were starting to move out here. And how did you get out here? Well, horse and wagon, old Dobbin. And as the interurban era progressed, interurban is a term in the electric trolley industry to mean the city to city trolleys. People were getting wondering about this. Why can't we get a line out there? Now, here's the Laurel line, the classic 3-car train down at Rocky Glen. And the Laurel line, of course, became the first successful interurban. It began on May 20th, 1903. Here's one of the older cars. It's out on the Dunmore line. That's not a cow catcher. We'll talk about that later. But you got a lot of people thinking. And in fact, this fella here, James P. Dixon, as early as 1895, the president of the Dixon Manufacturing Company, who was a resident of Dalton, who actually was the first chief purchase of Dalton, decided, well, we can do this. And in 1901, he actually got a charter, fairly easy to do back in those days, from the state, for this thing called the Scranton, Factoryville, and Tunkhannock, one of many lines that never built in the state of Pennsylvania. And here's another one that never got built. And that was the Dalton Street Railway Company. And their charter came from this state in April of 1903. And all of the people involved in this were Wilkesboro men. And you see some famous names here, such as Abram Nesbitt, who was actually president of the Wilkesboro traction system. There's some other officials as well, and other people from that area. And they're all considering, let's build a Northern Electric, as far as we can go, out to Tunkhannock perhaps, and then we can connect it with our other slow trolley lines running up and down the Susquehanna and Lackawanna Valley, and it can take 5 hours to go from one end to the other. Now, would this ever happen in Scranton? The Dalton Street Railway had a problem. You get a franchise from the state, now you have to get a franchise and permission from the city. And they needed to build out of the city on West Market Street. They were going to go from Providence Square to Leggett's Gap. The Northern Electric was already starting out there. So this Ordinance 10 is introduced, and it's just full of the paper. In fact, if you want to really read whole page articles about corrupt councilmen, this is your opportunity to get on the newspapers and do that. So we have 2 moribund franchises, nothing built, but the franchise stays there forever. And that's going to really figure into building this line, because the two lines together have a franchise that goes out at least as far as Brookside, I think, and La Plume. And here are some other people you might know. William L. Connell, they call him a coal operator. I think he was also a legislator. I know he was involved with the Laurel line. Connell Junction is named for him. Another fella, Dr. Connell, and 2 other persons, they go ahead and they charter the Northern Electric Railway Company, and they can get these paper franchises that are sitting there doing nothing. And now they've got the right of way all tied up. And this is it was an interesting article. So yeah, I love the way this is done. This Councilman O'Connor says, I don't know who he is, but somebody knocked on my door, gave me an envelope and said, introduce this ordinance. And so he does in 1904. And all of a sudden, council has lots of questions. Somebody said, well, who's behind it? Gee, I don't know. And it was for 99 years, which is actually not a very long time in the street railway world of franchises. And this guy was saying, this councilman saying, why does it have to end when I'm dead? But the real thing was the Dalton Street Railway behind it. And they didn't know. They postponed their action a few months until promoters did come forth. And I guess they convinced them they had the money. And, we're not the Dalton Street Railway, even though they had the franchise. So in the end, they actually get the franchise. They can build along West Market Street from Providence Square out to the Notch, their way out of town. I think the 22nd and 23rd wards They get their articles of incorporation filed in September 1905, and that kind of specifies where it is. W.L. Connell is president. We have some Scranton people involved and some people from the Harrisburg area. And they take this man. He worked for the Wilkesboro, Wyoming Valley traction. That was Wilkesboro. And they appoint him vice president and general manager. And that's Bob Day. And he's going to stay with the Northern Electric the entire time. He will never leave it. And he's kind of known, and so I've seen this once in the newspaper, as Mr. Northern Electric. It's also in a number of books. Here's Leggett's Gap. Now, I have seen Leggett's Gap put in without the apostrophe, and I've seen it put in with the apostrophe, so I really don't know what's right. They've also called it Providence Notch, and that was the way out. Anybody, heading up to the Abingtons today, this is the way you go. There's the D.L.N.W. Railroad. The road there was the Abington Turnpike and Plank Road Company, which later became the Northern Boulevard Company. And I believe that was established about 1853. The name probably refers to the fact that they did have a plank road in there, so you didn't go over all the ruts. But after a lot of negotiations that weren't very successful, the railway finally had to just buy the whole turnpike. Not an unusual case. If you take a look at Philadelphia, the streetcar company down there owns a bunch of turnpikes, so it's not unusual. And they're going to have to go ahead and do a lot of blasting in here so that the road can remain viable for wagoneers and they can get the streetcar in. And if you look at the poles along the left side of the road, see, I can see my mouse as long as it's not on the screen, but that's the trolley line over on the left side of the road. Okay, now the construction begins in 1906. You have March, I think. You have to, tie up all the legal niceties, and they start, building, I think, out there, and they're building the Brookside Car House and the Powerhouse, which is just a bit north from Dalton. And then they start laying tracks south through the various communities. There's another crew that begins working through the Notch. And while we don't have any pictures from 1906, this is a picture of them moving north of Factoryville. And it really shows all the heavy labor that was involved. A lot of hand labor, mules, horses. Probably they put a railroad in there too to carry supplies. The rail had to get in there somewhere. But it wasn't easy to do this, but they actually met up finally, and the line was set up. From our Electric Railway Journal collection down at the Trolley Museum, they did a big article on the car house, and I can still remember this building. Empty, of course, no tracks, but the building was there till the 50s or 60s, I think. And you see some of the cars, and it's alongside the road. The Powerhouse is behind it. That's a hardware store today. And here's the comfortable surroundings a worker would have to contend with. And, it's probably an unheated building. These are the pits so that you can get underneath the car, and of course, covered with litter. It's a 1908 view, I believe. And most of these bays, 2 tracks per bay, would have a pit. There was a blacksmith shop, and that is down on the bottom of that collection of tracks. It was a very rudimentary shop, and the machine shop didn't have much. Small lathe, a grindstone, maybe a drill press, bunch of small tools, and they had a blacksmith shop. Basically, they sent all their cars out somewhere to get repaired. And I'm guessing probably the Scranton railway shops, because there was a track connection. And the 1917 Zimmerman report would indicate that there's still no reason to go ahead and enlarge any of the shop facilities. That's what it looks like, though. There's your buildings. There's a couple of cars. There's the Powerhouse in the back. They had a storage capacity inside of about 18 cars. And counting the work cars and the freight cars, they wind up with 30 or 32. And then they have to store cars outside. All the work cars get stored outside. They probably don't look very well. They're wood. But this is what it looks like. Apparently, I don't know much about this, but there was a baseball field located here, which could have provided the Northern Electric with some passenger business. And there's a picture of the powerhouse. Again, they were talking about this, and I did this for a railway group, a trolley group. So all that technical stuff over on the right that you might not care about, they were very interested in. Some people are very interested in things like 25 cycle AC power. I really don't care, but that's what they did. This was a DC operation, as most trolley lines were direct current. Now this is kind of interesting. There were 5 local guys that decided, if we buy power from the interurban, we can sell it to other local customers. These guys are already selling it. The interurban is already selling it to Clark Summit and Chinchilla. They want to expand this. So they come up with this thing called the Abington Electric Company, which is going to be owned by the Northern Electric. And the Abington Electric Company will buy power at $350, and they're going to sell it for twice as much. Why the interurban didn't do this, or the railway, I don't know. And they ran the power for 12 hours a day, and then at night when it was off, you put on your kerosene lamps or went to bed. That's the car line in front. And here's the inside, some rotary converters. Again, it was very exciting for some people who really, really, like this. There's also people that like to know how many rivets are in it, and they can tell you if the car had an accident if they put the same number of rivets back. But to move on, there were 2 other permanent substations, because when you run direct current down a line, the current drops. And as the current drops, your car doesn't go very fast. It gets slower and slower. So down in Chinchilla, they put this little substation in, and they could run some high voltage power down to it, and there'd be a converter in that too, and you can see them there on the bottom. They would take that down, they would step it down to 600 volts. Eventually, as they head farther north, they're going to put another substation around Foster, which my mother always called Hop Bottom. Don't ask me why. And they would eventually buy as well 2 portable substations. These things are on wheels. They got couplers. They can be moved around where they need them. And so one would be on the Lackawanna line, which had on the weekends heavy service, 2-car trains, sometimes every 15 to 20 minutes. And so this thing could be wheeled down toward the end of the Lackawanna line towards its station. In the winter, they left it right around the junction at Factoryville. So it would continue to boost the current, but they didn't have the heavy traffic going down to the park. They ordered initially 6 cars. 5 were complete coaches. 1 had a baggage section, and in the industry, we call that a combine. And they arrive on flat cars from the J.G. Bro Company, which is located in Philadelphia. And I put this map in so that you could see, well, how did they get from the Northern Electric yard, which was be essentially at or under the Mulberry Street Bridge, out to their own line in Leggett's Gap? Well, take a look. Look at the railroad. The railroad is a bunch of lines with those little crosses. Scranton Railway is the black and white line, and there's a connection. Scranton Railway could get cars of rail or cars of coal for its powerhouse there. They had one at one time. So this connection was used to get the cars off the flat car. And then probably a Scranton Railway motorman would motor the cars up to Market Street, where a Northern Electric motorman would take the car. Here's what the cars look like. It's a builder's photo of some of the later cars that were ordered. And you can see they ordered a whole bunch of stuff. The cars had a very low roof or a low profile, because when you went over Carbon Street and you went under a Delaware and Hudson branch, and that bridge is still very low. So they did order a bunch of cars. several actually, as the line was expanded. And for all the rail fans out there like Tori Watkins, here it is. Here's everything that they owned, including the sweeper. They had some express cars. They actually would have 5 express cars and a coal car, which sometimes would be used to pull railroad freight cars. And here's probably one of the most useful cars. In the trolley parlance, we call it an outhouse on the raft. But notice the cab is very narrow, and those stakes would be able, you could put side panels up if you were carrying gravel or sand or ballast. You could put rails that could hang over this side of the car, the ends of the car, if need be. And it was very useful, and it stayed the whole time. And here's the sweeper. Did they need a sweeper? Well, they never used this thing out on the right of way, but they had to sweep Market Street. That would be part of their franchise. That street had to be taken care of. And so that thing was always out there, and it probably derailed a whole bunch of times. These things tended to do that, especially on nasty, icy days. We know nothing about this car. We all know it's the first car, and it carries no passengers. It's an inspection car. Days on it. Some of his other compatriots are on it. I suspect it might have come from Scranton Railway. It's a possibility. It's low powered, but they went out there and they took a look at it before the line was going to open, and he sees track problems and says, we need to fix this and we need to fix that. So they moved the date back a couple of times from May to June, and finally to July. And from Jim Wirt, this newspaper photograph of the first car to get into Scranton. It's an unknown group of crew members, but the first car leaves Brookside on July 1st, 1907 at 5, and it gets downtown to the terminus, and which initially is on Linden Street before Wyoming, and probably takes about 50 minutes. And at 6 o'clock, the poles are changed. So what I have to do, so the car is not going around the block, I have to take control handles from one end to the other. I have to take that pole down and put another one up. All the seats in the car are going to have to be turned unless you want to ride backwards. So I'm a crew, and I have to do that thing. And then they're going to head on the 11-mile trip to Dalton. And the first day was pretty good, 7,000 to 8,000 people. Now, that thing is not a cow catcher. And I don't know how many times I show cars with these things and oh yeah, it's a cow catcher. But if I hit a car, let me tell you, the cow's not going to do any good, but neither am I. I'll be off the track. But that is a fender. That was one of the ways that was one of the devices that was used to try to protect unwary pedestrians or dumb pedestrians or people who want to run in front of cars. I mean, you still see it today. And when they didn't have that fender, you can imagine if the car can't stop, look at those wheels. You can imagine what the wheels are going to do to you. So that fender was supposed to catch you. I've actually seen a movie of that being demonstrated out in Los Angeles. And it looked like you landed pretty hard on that thing, but you survived. You survived. And there's another fender, so we won't have to go through there. Look at that, 880,000 riders the first year. So that would have been considered good. They had a 30-minute service from Scranton to Dalton. And they also ran additional cars from Scranton up to number 23 school along through the 22nd and 3rd Ward. These people had never had any transit service unless they had hiked down to North Main Avenue and Market Street in Providence. So they were very happy about this. And there's another view. And if you look on the left, that is the track connection between the Northern Electric and Scranton Railway. Scranton Railway is heading off to the right. I suspect at least some of those buildings were still there. Now, in order to get to Scranton, they had to come up with a deal. It was 2.75 miles over the Scranton Railway, and they come up with another 990-year lease. Very common, again, in the industry. In 1907, and they agreed that of every 5 cents collected, Scranton Railway was going to get 0.0275 cents. Plus, they're going to get a percentage of the freight business. And that's going to net Scranton Railway $50,000 a year. It's very advantageous to the local city system. Now, in 1908, newspaper article actually advertises or announces, if you want to use this very grandiose and ambitious plan. Hey, we're going to go to Binghamton. It's 60 miles to Binghamton. But, you know, we're going to head out there. And I know I didn't get a chance to color this, and I'm so sorry. But if you go to Binghamton, you're going to come down to Propose right away, and you'll see the Northern Electric track. And, you know, there's Tiffany, you know, and it's going to come down through Foster and Nicholson and down into Scranton. Mary Ann was gracious enough to sell me one of these books that was surplus, and I take very good care of it. But when the cars initially entered Scranton, take a look at Carbon Street, top middle, and they came in on Capouse to Penn, and then they swung over Penn to Linden Street to their terminal. And they had to go by the Dixon locomotive. They had to cross the very busy D&H Railroad. The crossing by the river at Carbon Street had accidents every week. And that was also the way Scranton Railway cars had to go through. And it was very congested. And that's the second map. If you kind of look over on the right, you know, there's and the switches aren't all in because this is, I think, 1895, well before the Northern Electric. But there's Penn and there's Linden. And here's the post office on the corner of North Washington and Linden. There's the Scranton Railway car barn, the initial one, which will figure in to our story later. And the terminal is right in there. So what happens in 1911, and the Scranton Railway is well involved in this. The 1911 construction of the Mulberry Street Bridge takes place, and there are two sections of that bridge. One side has it has provision for automobiles, and the side on the left has provision for streetcars. So it's a private right of way. We had that kind of thing here in Pittsburgh on what was known as the Smithfield Street Bridge. And right away, you know, both lines switched over as soon as they could to using that. And I mean, if you look over, you can see the car barn, and you can see Carbon Street. I mean, I can see it crossing the river past the Dixon Locomotive Works and, you know, through another block or two. That was all very slow. And both companies were able to speed up their schedules. And of course, that was time is money kind of thing. You know, here's a map out of the Scranton book, kind of shows you what they're going to do now is Providence Road over to the Mulberry Street Bridge. They're going to turn again, this time on Franklin to Linden. And I believe by this time, this is a 1934 map, they would have been stopping at a storefront on 227 Wyoming Avenue. On the way back, they're going to head down Wyoming to Mulberry and straight across the bridge. So it really saves an awful lot of time. Thank you very much for sending this to me, Mary Ann. I found this one of the publications you guys sent me. And, you know, as many pictures as I've scanned, I never saw this before. So that's why I'm going to come back to haunt you until I can find it and get a high-res scan. But there's the Northern Electric car, and it's sitting in front of its station at 227 Wyoming. And it may have just pulled in or it's ready to leave. I can't tell because it's a JPEG which way the pole is set. So I don't know if they're ready to leave, but the higher res photo will certainly tell me. Here's a 2-car train, which were not uncommon during rush hours. They were not uncommon on Saturdays and Sundays when Lake Winola and other parks were in full swing, and they're sitting in front of their ticket office. Now, eventually the station's going to move across the street and become a stop, and we'll talk about later. That was just in the last year of operation. There's that fender again. All these people, look at how, and kids dress this way too. So Sarah and Mary Ann, you'd have to dress like that. And I hope you guys have fancy hats. This is probably a special car simply because it seems to be loading on Linden Street. There's a cathedral in the back, and this was Scranton Railway track. But they allowed them to do that, and this kept Wyoming Avenue clear if there was a lot of loading going on for the regular streetcars. And here's a car on Mulberry Street. clanging along. He's heading outbound. He's left Scranton now. That's pretty typical. Cars were beautiful red and cream cars. Inside, it was polished wood, and the plush seats were red. So another Dallin aerial photo. But look at the Mulberry Street Bridge and this follow Providence Road all the way up past the car barns, all the way up. You guys could probably tell where Providence Square is. And there's a road, now a highway, of course, heading up through Leggett's Gap. That's how the cars of Northern Electric cars are going to leave. And there's the lower line down below. Now we'll look a little bit at the city operation. These cars really endured 15, 20 minutes of lots of congestion. And, I found this shot of 505. There shows you a very good view of the bridge and what it looked like. And I still remember my mom and dad driving and me in the back seat looking at those trolley tracks, which were no longer being used, but they still excited me greatly. And the Northern Electric left. And of course, the bridge is gone. But 505, believe it or not, that car went up to Rail City, Waterford, New York, and it's back in the area and it's being restored. Not only that, but it's going to run someday on the lower line. As we all know, that's where the Trolley Museum cars operate. Here's the other side of the bridge. There's the Scranton Hospital where I was born. And Ed took these all in the 40s. There's the track coming off to the right that went to Carbon Street. And even after the tracks off Carbon Street left, until about 1940 or 42, there was a 3-track yard located along Carbon Street. That was what we saw on the map. So as long as that was there, and they needed that storage space, they would use that track. So there's where it is. Of course, they got rid of that yard after the West Side lines went. 6 lines went, and they didn't need the storage space anymore. Here we are leaving North Main, getting onto Providence. Seidel's about 2 blocks away. Great restaurant. Thanks for telling me about that, Marianne, because I really like eating there. And we're going to head up. There's Providence Square. Lots of residences, your typical, storefront / house, particularly as you get up to a business location. And the car is double tracked here. It's going to cross over from the right to the left-hand track to get onto its connection to go up the hill. And I never was able to find Jack Hiddlestone. He wasn't feeling well by the time I found out about this. So I stole it from a book that he wrote. Very nice book. But it shows, and I'd love to find the original real photo card. But this shows the 2-car train, and it's on its own track on West Market Street. And look at that steep hill heading up. It doesn't look steep for your powered car, but boy, on an icy day, particularly a slippery day, a day with leaves, that can cause a lot of problems for a steel wheel on a steel rail. And another shot of this about 1910. And the company sweeper would spend almost all of its time here on Market Street, and I'm sure it had a lot of fun too. But by franchise, it had to clear the street. They were also supposed to maintain the street within its track area in about a foot and a half to either side, and that's going to become a bugaboo down the road. Look at that steep hill again. Wow. Now, the 12,000 people that lived in this area would all have to walk down the Scranton Railway until this car showed up. And between the local cars running off to Dalton and the 2-car trains that left Scranton running through here, they also ran local service. So there might have been a car every 5 to 10 minutes here. And that gave people wonderful, wonderful service. They were also, you weren't allowed to pick up once you got onto North Main Avenue or Providence Road, so once the passengers had gone on and you got to Providence Square, you essentially had as much of an express service as you can get, because you might be trundling behind a wagon or you might be rumbling behind another Scranton Railway car that's picking up every half block. But this is about 1919. The tracks aren't in too bad a shape yet. Now, that's just a shot that I garnered from the book. But there's all the track on West Market Street. And as you follow it up, you're going to see, and I think that's up. I remember seeing this crossing, and I remember seeing that trestle. There's the New York, Ontario, and Western, and it's actually an at-grade crossing, something trolley lines don't like. It's a fairly busy branch. They take freight trains down to connect with the Lehigh Valley in Sibley, but they had a crossing, and so it would have had to been signaled, or a watchman would have been there. And then there's Leggett's Gap starting up. You can see where they're crossing Leggett's Creek. And you're beyond that now. So the creek is, I think, over, there's the track over to the left, and you're really going into the notch. And the toll booth is there. And until the state in the 20s, there's, I mean, maybe a little earlier than that, eventually the state would buy out all these private turnpike companies that were located everywhere, a ton of them in Southeast Pennsylvania. And the Northern Electric had bought this. So for a while, for a number of years, they could collect tolls, and that helped to defray their expenses. And there's another shot from the Electric Railway Journal. We have a whole set of those things, and it's a nice snowy day, and you know, there's kind of a wagon in there fighting their way through, and there's the trolley again over on the left side, and we're taking it from the Delaware, Lackawanna, and Western. There was a toll booth on the other side as well. And the tracks at this point have crossed over. So as we go north, they're going to stay on the right side, at least as far as Clark Summit. And that building is still there. Chuck Compass, unfortunately, isn't here, but he was very kind to let me scan a series of postcards that he found. You know, those little postcard books you buy with 14 cards. You can see the poles, and there's the line. We've left Leggett's Gap, and we're heading off to Chinchilla and Clark Summit, Glenburn, which I have seen spelled two different ways. eBay was a nice place to get postcards, and I would always try to grab some of these, get an idea. That actually is in the early days, because that track is very well ballasted, a lot of nice stone in there, which means a lot of good drainage, and a pretty high speed track. Later, that, like the lower line, they would start dumping coal in there, and that doesn't make that good a roadbed. In Chinchilla, we had a station opposite the post office, and that little diamond thing just behind the building on the right, that was one of many different kinds of unstandard railroad crossings. I remember seeing some of those up in Einan and Archibald, but we now have a standardized crossing, the Crossbucks, the X, but there we are. And there's the station. Sometimes these stations also served as stores, or in this case, it's a grocery. So you go in and bought a ticket, and then you stood out there and waited for the car. Now, they had passing sidings about every mile and a half, mile and 3/4. Here's one of them. The line has been abandoned. You can see the tracks there, the wires down, but, you know, kind of shows you that's the siding. So they could continue, you know, to run cars. You have to pass them. Much of the line was a single track. It was like this. In this case, we have signals. They're installed in 1914. Some of the sidings are lengthened. And I've read, anyway, that cars sometimes could just keep passing. They run on a timetable and a schedule. They don't run on orders. With the signals, they're able to run a lot of cars in a very short space. Now, we're at the bottom of the hill that heads from Chinchilla, if I remember correctly, to Clark Summit. And what I remember was all these buildings are all probably gone, but the you know, the company I'd said sold power to the customers along the line. And one thing that would happen was one of these cars would, you know, the guy would put it on a peg, which means he's got his controller up full and he's flying up the hill or flying on a straightaway, and the lights are going to dim. But nobody has TV or computers, So that's probably not a problem. Here's a shot of Clark Summit, just a general picture. I haven't been able to find a railway line in there, but that's one of the larger towns that they get to serve, a more established car. And at the top of the hill is this, Northern Electric Park. I just found the postcard. Didn't get a chance to scan my own. There's that odd-shaped diamond crossing symbol again. They opened the park up about 1908. Most trolley companies had a park, place to bring people to spend more money. You ride the cars to, you ride the cars from, and you spend money inside the park. They had some rides, carousel, common, roller coaster, food concessions, and as usual in that period, picnics and dances were held, and the facilities were there for that. I bumped into this, and this is a really nice postcard. So it's a hot, humid day like you guys are talking about, and it's going to rain. And here you are, dressed like this to the nines with ties on and buttons, and your kids grumbling about that. And I don't think I like those days, but there we are outside the park. And there's the entrance to the park. And we'll roll down through what is considered back then, I guess, downtown Clark Summit. We're heading to siding. So the station is right behind me. And in fact, there it is. Their station is being obscured by the flag. And, you know, it's a party of some kind. The veterans are coming back. We're going to have a parade. You know, there's the local band over there on the right. But there's the passing siding, and this is pretty much where people board it. And then the station building was where you waited. There it is. And there are the people on a, not a very well paved platform. It's probably gravel, but the car is down there. Another 2-car train. He may be coming back from Lake Winola. But it could have been one of those rush hour special cars as well. There's not a whole lot of information about it, but it's a good view of the car, and there's a close-up of the building. Take a look over to the left. There's a freight platform. Okay, we're going to talk about that, the carrying of freight in a little bit. Now, beyond that, right before the Northern Electric Trail begins, you cross the railroad. And here's the, this is, of course, after the line was abandoned. And this wide bridge was sitting there. The D&W had to erect this for the trolley company when they totally relocated their line through Clark Summit, Chinchilla, and other places. It was a complete relocation. So the and there it is. There's the actual bridge, and you can see on the pole line, you can see supports. So the wire's there. And down below is the abandoned bridge. Now, I couldn't find the photograph I took. When I was dating my wife, and we went up to Scranton. My mother had lived in Clark Summit for about 2 or 3 years in that area. And she was driving us around. And when I came to this bridge, the Delaware and Hudson Railroad at that point owned the tracks, and they had a derailment. So it's like, Mom, stop. Yeah, okay. But I went out and I was taking pictures off this bridge that was still there. And I keep looking at it. Why in the hell? There's a gas line on it. Why in the hell is there a 10-foot wide bridge? And it dawned on me then that was the Northern Electric Bridge. We're talking about maybe 1989, 88. And a PennDOT fellow comes walking up saying, better get your pictures now. We're tearing it down Monday. So somewhere I have the picture. And I saw a piece of the Northern Electric, and then you head off on a trail. And now, how would you like to, take a look at that track, and how would you like to move 50 or 60 miles an hour? But where you had these straightaways, the car operators did just that because they lost so much time sometimes behind city cars and other city traffic. And then you're going to get through Glenburn. I've seen that spelled as a 1 word, and I've seen it spelled as 2. In this case, it's 1 word, so I'm going with that. And take a look in the middle. You'll see kind of a line with some poles. That's the car line there. We're in Dalton, which, was initially the end of the terminus. And wasn't that as big as it probably is now. But this is where the line ended initially. They had a siding just south of Dalton. It was signal as well, so you could pass. Here's a postcard, which is incorrectly colored, what looks to me green. Now, most of these postcards that I buy, they don't really have accurate colors. A lot of them, I think, were colored in Germany, in fact, and they didn't care. I mean, everything was not that there weren't green cars in many railway systems. They were green and cream. But Northern Electric, of course, was red and cream. Here's motorman Charles Wolf, or conductor rather, Charles Wolf. He's on the right. He's the guy that collects the money. He's the guy that calls out the stops. He deals with passengers. He might even throw a drunk off the car periodically. That's the combine that we talked about. It's got a baggage section, and freight could be carried in that as well. Here's the Dalton station, which is still there. I think it's a puppy salon now. And this was a substantial building. Not only did you have a freight area, you had a passenger area, but you actually had a restaurant inside, and there was a newsstand. And then more of the signaling. Brookside is, if you look at the semaphore and then just to the left, that building is Brookside. So we're looking north, and we're passing the car barn, and we're going to pass the powerhouse. And in fact, there was a siding at the car barn. And now I'm looking south, and that building is still there. It's been changed. It's been added to, but it's some kind of a hardware store. I don't happen to remember the name of it. Some of you probably would. They extend to Factoryville on January 11th, 1908, and they begin building the Lackawanna branch, which is about 6 miles, and they open that in May, the end of May of 1908. And, you know, that requires more money. They had a 1906 reorganization, and now we start getting into a corporate octopus of holding companies and companies leasing other companies. It's kind of crazy. They formed the Northern Electric Company of New York, and that's a holding company, and it owns the entire stock of the Northern Electric Company of Pennsylvania. And we'll find out in a minute why they may have created that New York company. And we'll head past Brookside. Look at the ramp up there on the right. Okay, that's going to go across the Delaware, Lackawanna, and Western. And it's a big, big bridge. A little bit bigger than the one at Ackerley. This is 450 feet long, and at Ackerley at the fairgrounds, that was about 440. Not that big, but it's going to cross the railroad. You can see that over on the left. This is near La Plume. It's a big, long grade. And on the other side today, if you really want to go into the woods and get tick bites and look for copperheads and maybe some rattlers, you can see those stone abutments. I don't want to get a tick bite. Here's another postcard view. And that really gives you an idea of the long 180 or so foot ramp that crossed the railroad. Oh, nice. I mean, for rail fans, that's exciting. The automatic signal system is here. You can see a passing siding where cars went through pretty fast. I mean, think of a 15 or a 30-minute headway, and that's what those signals were put in for. There's the railroad, the Delaware, Lackawanna, and Western over on the left. This signal 129, if anybody has a map of the signals. I don't. The grading isn't that good now. Where's the stone? I don't know. It is high enough up that it will drain the water, you know, but you no longer have the stones. So the ties are going to start sinking into the ground here. Here's a red car. It's correct, up at La Plume. Beautiful area. And then you have this south of Factoryville. We have this siding using a mix of semaphores and lights. Now, they cut off away from the road. They kind of, and I've never wandered in through here, but they do cut off and sort of wander northwest to get over into the Factoryville area. And they leave La Plume, and they do that, and it's pretty wild country here, as you can see, a little desolate. And they're going to build this bridge over 200 feet long over the south branch of the Tunkhannock Creek, and that's south of Factoryville. And they'll have a very nice station in Factoryville, which will burn, and they'll replace it with a smaller station. Look at the freight piled up on the outside to either be picked up or dropped off. Now, the Northern Electric, except in Scranton, they tried to stay away from the main street. I don't know why. I don't know if it was to stay away from traffic or attempt to stay away from paving, the paving requirements that a city of some type, borough, might require. But they always were kind of in the back, a block or two away on their own track. Here's Lake Winola. They bought the ownership of the lake, and they would make it an amusement center, place to take people, place for them to spend money on the company, and also, of course, place to ride the cars to and from. And you had a lot of water stuff. They put a Ferris wheel in, the usual dance pavilion, and lots of food. And of course, from what I read, this is where the elite used to come out and stay. And now it was accessible to everybody, and it only cost 90 cents and a 1 hour ride to go out there. So you could just leave the valley and have a great time. And this was the Clifton Hotel. Now, I don't think the average Scrantonian ever stayed there, but the elite would have. Here's the branch up on top, the regular line off to the right, the Lake Winola line cutting off to the left. There's the siding where they would have parked the portable substation. And there's some of the track down there on the bottom. So it looks like a big 4-track right away, doesn't it? But it's never more than single track. I don't know why all that space is there. But they're putting the track down. I don't see, well, I do see some stone, but it looks kind of primitive. The ties are kind of rough cut, rough hewn. And Lake Winola is going to open on May 30th of 1908, and everybody's going to go dressed to the nines again. Gentlemen mostly wearing hats, women wearing hats, kids all dressed up, boys in their knickers, and on a hot day. And we're all going to get out there and maybe get wet. But there's a 2-car train. There's one of the fenders on it, and we're right in front of the terminal. Loading up. There's the Northern Electric station that was built after they bought the park. This station went in there, and the cars actually look red, and there's a passenger car, and behind it is a freight car. If you take a look on the left, that is a freight car. And there's the two views of the 2-track terminal. And beyond that was a creamery and a freight house. And Ira Fine, I met his son here early on in the 70s, late 70s here in Pittsburgh. Ira Fine would become a receiver of the system. He remembers as a boy 2 or 3 tracks beyond the station. And there is conductor Charles Wolf again at the station. All dressed up, both motormen all dressed up. Now, plenty of ads. You can go through the paper, and it's a lot of fun to watch all this. I actually won this on eBay before newspapers.com. But you can see the cars are leaving every 15 minutes, advertising Lake Winola, advertising Northern Electric Park. By now, it's the Scranton and Binghamton Traction Company. Another company has been formed to lease or buy the existing system, the existing company. And here's another ad. And I thought this was neat because, look, the new branch to Nicholson is now completed. And the third one I thought this was neat because it shows all the musical venues that's going to go on at Lake Winola, and they'll put in a plug for the Northern Electric Park. Pretty interesting, I thought, though. And here are some happy people. Just they read the ad, and we're going to go do it, and there they are, and everybody's got a picture to be taken, but. And I think this is maybe a later day picture, late teens, early 20s. The women are dressed, but certainly not as heavily dressed as 1908 or 1910. And kids, unless they're considered in bathing suits, are not as neatly dressed either. Now, Lake Winola runs a ton of passenger service, and in, September, October shows up and the winter sets in. Nobody's going up to the park. May make 4, I've seen schedules with 5 daily round trips. So here we are on some nasty snowy day. Okay, you guys in the humidity out there with the thunderstorms, do you wish this was going on? But look at the drifts. All this would have been hand dug. The snow sweeper wouldn't have worked out here and with the brooms. So all this was hand dug by a whole bunch of people. It's even possible that some of the local farmers helped the street railway company because they wanted that service. That little platform could have been for freight, but I don't know.
George, excuse me. I don't want to cut you off, but if you could speed through a little bit, I do want to leave some time for questions, and it is after 3 already.
Oh, really? So, okay. Well, all right. Here's some more drifts, and here's some more drifts. That's a freight car. We'll talk a little bit about freight. Here's what it was supposed to be. The Scranton and Binghamton leased all this stuff. They leased everything, and they in 1914 they buy the entire Binghamton Street Railway Company. Because they want to go to Binghamton and they think they can't get their own entrance. Meanwhile, we're going up to Nicholson, and here's the big bridge over Martin's Creek, and they're going to stop here until they build a bridge. Then they're going to go into Nicholson. And if you look to the left of the tower, there's that bridge we just saw. And right around the some of the churches in the middle is the Northern Electric Station. Another view of Nicholson. And I'll breeze through this. There's the railroad being put in. This is where they're building the viaduct. But I wanted you to get an idea of what the territory looked like. And they're going to build this. The railroad's going to build this viaduct, but I don't care. There's the Northern Electric Station in Nicholson. And the track heading off to the north. It was an old barn. And they converted it, and then it burned as well. And they would put a smaller station in. And now we're looking into the wild country north of the line, where it's going to cost a lot more money to build. There's some more track behind. That church is still there over on the right. So let's go north. Well, there's the trolley line down below too. Now, that track must still be built because I think there's construction equipment in the back. Supposed to be at Nicholson in 1913. Now we got another reorganization in 1910. The Scranton Binghamton organizes under the state's Steam Railway Act. That gives them eminent domain so they can start taking land from people. And then they acquire all the stock of the other companies. It's an octopus, and they buy in 1914, as I said, the Binghamton Railway for almost $1 million. Now, that's a huge expenditure that they're going to find out that's a problem because you're going up into this area, and the problem is there doesn't seem to be anybody there. We're near Foster. Not a whole lot of traffic potential here in Lithia Valley. The road isn't even a very big thing, but they're going to use this equipment. They bring in a little railroad, assemble it, and they go to Nicholson, or rather from Nicholson to Hot Bottom on July 6th, 1915. Then they reach Foster in August on 1915. Finally, the last 9 miles to Tiffany Junction, which is South Montrose. And from there, you get Lewis Hart's hack to go into Montrose. They'll never get into Montrose, which is seen above. They want to electrify about a half a mile of the Lehigh Valley, put a wire over it. They discuss it with them. The Lehigh Valley eventually says no. And that's how you're going to get into Montrose. This essentially becomes the end of the line forever. Now, one thing they wanted to do was try to eliminate the track in Scranton. And they were going to do that by cutting off to the left and then going all on to Delaware, Lackawanna, and Western. And you can see that here in this picture again. Follow the railroad and eliminate even the track on Market Street to get into Lickett Sap. And they didn't have the money for that. In 1907, the state allows trolley companies to run freight, and that's what they start doing. And they carry all sorts of farm products, vinegar, all kinds of less than carload packages, tons of milk and dairy products. The milk is a mainstay. for the company, and they bring in a lot of money. And they even established 2 creameries, which they lease to the dairy company, so they don't have to handle any of the milk. They just run it. And this is the one leased to Burchell. There's the milk cans. There's another. There's the one at Lake Winola, the smaller freight station at Lake Winola. And this is up at Lithia Valley. There's the can. So I'm a farmer. I bring my wagon up. They're all tagged. They have a tag. My name's on it, and I drop it there, and the car picks it up, and they'll bring those cans back. And standing in for the Northern Electric is the Hershey Transit, which also was built to run milk to the chocolate factory. So here's what the inside looks like, and this guy is working on his paperwork. The freight terminal downtown was this building that's being built, the Scranton Railway car shop, and would also be used by the Blue Line. And in addition, they would run to various places along the street. Now, why am I not moving here? I froze. How did I freeze? Sarah, I froze. What do I want to do? I have a few more slides left. We can turn it off and come right back in on this slide.
You can. There was a weird thing that popped up on the right-hand side of your screen. You might have clicked off or made another text box.
Oh, I don't think so. I've been hitting
taking it up.
I mean, there's nothing weird. Your picture's there, delete is there. Nothing weird. Well, let me see if I can do that. Let me see if we stop the share and then put it right back on. Okay. What I'm looking for is my mouse. Oh, darn. Where is my mouse? Let me see if I can use escape. Yeah, there's something weird because it froze. It froze. Now I see my mouse, but I don't see my mouse on the screen. So I can't get up. I think I can get up to where it says stop share to start sharing again. I don't know why. You have anything weird on your?
No.
Okay, escape is not doing it either.
Okay. I don't know that I could end the screen sharing. You could just kind of wrap it up.
Well, we had a little bit on the end, and although I guess people can see it when we post it. We were kind of coming to the end with the Lackawanna Trail. I just don't know what in the heck. I can't go either way, which is weird.
Okay.
Oh my word! I never saw this happen. Well, I never liked this Mac anyway. This one. Now I love my Macs in general, but this is the worst one I've ever had. And I swear I have a bad SSD in it, an SSD drive. And I wanted to really show a picture to Tori Watkins. Maybe you can end it and I can just move it all the way up to that. Because
we can try that.
Let's try that.
All
Let's
right.
see if you can end it, and then I'll get it started again. I don't know what's freezing it here, but I found that picture specifically.
Actually, I can't end it. Marianne has to end it because I made Marianne the host.
Oh, what's happening?
I don't know. I'm afraid my power is going to go out here.
All of a sudden something moved. Well, let's move along.
Oh, there
hey,
you go. All right.
Working again. So different. Look at all the stuff. There's loading and unloading. And the freight business brings in a lot of money. And they came, and got coal for their power plant from this mine up at Bull's Head, from the Pig and Whistle. And this is where Scranton Railway also got it. And then they're going to find calm. They buy mounds of calm, which is all over the place. And a lot of people can't burn it in their houses, but the Loreline could burn it. The Northern Electric had boilers they could burn. You're going to have to wash this thing. And we're going to see how they do that. And then they establish coal pockets. They get coal, and they establish several coal pockets, Factoryville, Nicholson, Brooklyn. They lease them out to coal dealers. This is their coal carrying cars that will take them either out on a line or into the power plant. And they're going to go and get the calm that was burned here, washed at the Roaring Brook Coal Company washery, and that's under the Mulberry Street Bridge. So you can just see on the map, there's the track, coming up above the L. And it's going to show you that. And then the ashes had to be taken out. So they had a little trail of ashes as well. We don't know. Jim Wirt doesn't even know what this is. And I've left it in there hoping we can find out why a rock crusher was in it. But the D&W aligns their railroad in 1915. They're going to sell a lot of their road right away to the state on condition that you build a highway. But they also lose the ability to serve a couple of the points that they had when their track was lower. So they're going to build an interchange, and the Northern Electric's going to be able to interchange some freight cars with them in Nicholson, and a quarry is going to take a lot of stone out of there, also near Nicholson, used for railroad ballast. Just look at the numbers real quick. The big things, the gross earnings and the net earnings. You're going to invest in a company where the costs keep going up. Nope. But you're going to have another quick reorganization. The Zimmerman report, I'll just summarize it, that you should, you run a 49-mile railroad. You should have never gone beyond Nicholson, is basically what it's saying. This whole report's going to say that. And you're losing a ton of money in 14 and 15 and 16. You're going to go default on your bonds in 1918. And that's what's going to happen. And then there's going to be a strike in 1921. And the bondholders are going to come after these people, charge mismanagement. What you're going to get is the last rendition of the railroad, the Scranton, Montrose, and Binghamton, where they again combine a bunch of stuff. They proposed the 26-mile extension to Binghamton, and look at the cost, almost $500,000. Well, that's going away. And the Lackawanna Trail is built, opens in 1922, basically paralleling the Northern Electric. And by that time, trucking is becoming more viable. More people are owning cars. People leave the railway, particularly the milk business is siphoned off by trucks, either the farmers taking it to the dairy, or the dairy's going out themselves. And so there's the milk cans in the car. You're going to see a lot less of that. The Montrose line's going to wither on the vine. 5 trips, all that money and 5 trips. They're going to cut that back eventually. There's the park. That's going to go away in the 20s. They sell it in 26. Part of this becomes a gas station. Lake Winola is sold in 31. And then they start shortening the line, first to Nicholson, then to Factoryville. They're scrapping it, trying to get enough cash. In fact, they even sell the powerhouse outright and start buying power. They can't pay for it either. Boland, who is one of the original directors, is still fighting and accusing the company of mismanagement, but they do give it to receivers. And the last big change downtown is they finally loop around the block, and they use Lackawanna Avenue and Wyoming Avenue, and there's no more changing ends. It's a little quicker. This one's on Lackawanna Avenue. They try to get into the bus business. They actually do establish a bus service to Fleetville and Waverly and Tunkhannock. Now, they try to abandon a railway and establish a bus service over the railway line. And Martz, I don't know if there's anything funny going on here, but Martz from Wilkesboro gets the contract. And so they try to go out of business. What happens is some employees buy a couple cars, they get the shop, they get court approval to do this. They make an attempt to run the system, and as an employee-owned thing, but they can't fix the track on Market Street, and the city is beginning to do all kind of paving, and they want the railway to put in its own its money, and they can't do it. So this police stop the cars, they start digging up the track, and a suit that's lost in common pleas court. The state Supreme Court says you shouldn't have done that, City of Scranton. It's already over, and the cars get scrapped, except for this one, which does something for a while before it starts rotting away in Factoryville. Now, the things that are left, there's the hardware store up on the upper right. There's the Dalton station. Cars would go on the left side of that. The bottom is the Nicholson station. Of course, we have 2 sections of trail that we can walk. That was the Northern Electric. And the neatest thing that I've seen, beside the remaining bridge, somebody used these doors to enclose their porch at La Plume. And I've tried to find a house, but I believe it's still there. Now, forget the epilogue. We're going to lose Hazleton. We're going to lose the Northern Electric. Although I've been on that bridge, the Scranton system is going to go away. And I wish Ed Miller had shot this 2 blocks away, because up at the top of the hill is my house. Here's Wilkesboro. That's going to go away. But that car survives. It's being restored. That's 790. the end of the Laurel line, and the old gentleman bought the first ticket out of Pittston. But for Tori, we're sitting on top of the roller coaster, Tori. You said that the Laurel line never went under a roller coaster, but there's the Pippin over on the left, and definitely being shot from the roller coaster. But if you still don't believe me, that my mom said she rode under the roller coaster, she was right, because there it is going under the Laurel line. It's after 1921 because the signal system has been put in after the big accident in July of 1920. And so, yes, there's mom. She's correct. And, you know, the end of Scranton. I love this one. And I'll just finish it with this, because here's the last car. The Green Ridge Suburban line makes its last trip. And that's the line that started everything in northeastern Pennsylvania. And that's one of the 4 cars there. So now we can have questions.
Thank you for sharing your photos. One of the things that's always so amazing to see is that how the views have changed so much, especially in downtown Chinchilla. It's hard to kind of match up what it looks like now to what it looked like then when the trolley was going through. So if anyone has questions, we do have a few minutes to take questions.
Corey here. Hello.
Hi, how you doing?
Hi. Well done, George. Thank you very
so
much. I look forward to watching the slower version on YouTube so I can read all your wonderful captions. Well done, boy.
Yeah. I have to apologize, but sometimes I'm like a John Wayne movie, you know, long and long-winded.
I'll take it.
Hey, this is Rick. How you doing, guys?
Pretty good.
Good, George. I'm a fan of all rail systems throughout the area, the region where I grew up, and I just want to say thank you, because I knew very little about the Northern Electric, other than maybe up to Clark Summit and Lake Manola. But I'm going to watch the YouTube version as well, because I want to just go back and forth and just make some notes on this. This is just great. Thanks so much for doing it.
Thank you so much. I was very happy to put this together.
Absolutely great.
And bore Sarah.
No, it's never boring. It's always things that photos I've never seen. So it's never boring.
It is a time thing, you know.
George, I just wanted to tell you thank you. I so much enjoyed this presentation. My uncle used to take the line up to Lake Winola. He played in a band up at the pavilion when he was a kid, and my mother used to ride the line. And I have all these tales that they used to tell me. I just really enjoyed your presentation. Thank you.
You're very welcome. Very welcome.
I thought it was great, but I couldn't believe how close the trolley cars came to homes and buildings.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
I hate to live in those homes.
There's a great Ed Miller picture. There was a line that went up to Georgetown, and it came off between the Laurel line and the Lehigh Valley and went over a huge trestle over all those railroads. And on the other side, there is a house right next to it. I mean, I could just look out the window and drop stuff on it. And that would probably be a house I wouldn't mind living in, but I think the rest of the family would be very unhappy about that.
Yeah.
So,
Well, if the trolleys were there, I wouldn't want to live in it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, have you ever seen in New York pictures of how close some of the elevated systems were to the
How
apartment?
close to what?
When they had the trains going over the street, the elevated lines, how close they were on narrow streets to the apartments.
Right.
You know, second floor, and you just could watch it or hear it.
That was
If
the
one wishes to watch
replacement of
this on
TV.
YouTube, what would you search for?
I'm sorry, Beth. Can you
I
repeat
say
that?
if one wishes to watch this on YouTube, I have some family members I know would be just over the moon to watch this. What would you Google to watch it on?
Our YouTube channel is for the Lackawanna Historical Society. So if you search for the Lackawanna Historical Society on YouTube, the video will probably be up in like two weeks or so. Because we do have to do some editing. But I could, I'll put our email address in the chat for you, Beth. If you email us, we can follow up when it's posted, so you'll know it's there. So you could share the link directly if you'd like.
I'd appreciate that. Thank you. Hi, Dom. Did you walk the tree today? Dom.
What? Pardon?
I was saying to Dom, I see him on the trail walking all the time.
Oh,
He's
okay.
past Boston now, I think.
Dom, you're muted.
You're
You have to
muted.
unmute yourself.
Oops.
Lower left corner.
While he's doing that, George, just want to tell you thank you much for that presentation.
Thank you.
Oh,
He's still
you're muted
muted.
again. Try one more time.
There ought to be a universal finger symbol for you're muted.
Lower left
Maybe,
corner, there's a
maybe
little
this or
microphone.
something, you know. that- I can't tell you how many
Through the
times
mic,
that's
right?
happened to people in different shows.
Since he's a presenter, it may be different.
You need to bring the cursor down so it populates, and then it's on the left-hand corner.
There you go, Delina.
I used to be able to unmute everybody universally, but that feature no longer exists.
Really?
I can mute everybody, but I can't unmute them.
Oh, gosh.
I only had the power to shut you all up, but that's it.
Oops.
Well, from here, you're probably, all you hear is the thunder up my end.
Yeah, me too. So I'm a
You hear
little
it?
worried about the power going out here.
Still
Well,
sunny.
look at it this way. I think my picnic is a washout that I'm invited to.
It might be.
Yeah.
So.
Dom is giving you the thumbs up. So very good.
Very good. All right. Does anyone have any other questions?
I have a question. I just want to tell Mary Ann and Sarah that I appreciate y'all doing this and having these kind of programs because they're very interesting. I was born in Scranton. I don't live in Scranton anymore, but I have a lot of family up there. And it's kind of rewarding to me to see all these
His
things
name
still
there,
being
John.
presented and to be experiencing that from afar. So
Well, I'm
thank you
glad.
very
I'm glad
much.
you were able to join us.
Thanks,
Absolutely.
Bill.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Tracy just donated a little boy's suit. Did I tell you that?
Yeah, that was my grandfather's little,
John something.
Bill.
I think. it was my
William the
grandfather's.
Third, I think.
Well, yeah, we love it.
Yeah, no, the second,
The second.
right. Dad's the third. He's still alive in Southwest Florida. So
And Bill, tell them who Bill Halstead the first was.
he's the one that was the second vice president of the Delaware, Lackawanna and Western Railroad. And he put the tracks through Halstead, Pennsylvania.
Halstead,
They
oh,
divided the
okay.
town in half and gave the name Halstead to half of it and Great Bend back to the rest of it.
Mhm.
George Madison Halstead, his son, he was the general manager of the Syracuse, Binghamton, and New York Railroad, which was a subsidiary of the Lackawanna in Buffalo, New York. And then also there is a cemetery plot outside of, or in Nicholson on the hillside overlooking the valley. And Orrin Lewis Halstead was a justice of the peace who oversaw all of the mergers that the Lackawanna had with all these little tiny subsidiary
That's
railroads.
her Uncle Morgan was a
And
minister.
they're all the graves are pretty much there in that cemetery plot. And I found that by accident one time when I was there videotaping the railroad. So it was a complete accident, but it's there. And it's a big plot too. So there's quite a bit of history that goes back with my family in Scranton and Halstead, Pennsylvania, and so on.
Well, we're glad you're here.
Very
Thank
good.
you.
Here's a trivia question. Does anybody know how the name Chinchilla came about of that town?
What?
There's a couple of stories.
There's a
One
couple
is chin,
stories.
my chin is chilly. One is the postmaster's wife had a beautiful chinchilla coat.
That's the right one.
That's the right one. Like that story. That's a good one. Seems like a good way to name a town.
What the heck would that be doing out in the middle of the Poconos? So we don't have any chinchillas there.
Good thing it wasn't a Persian lamb. That would be a weird name for a
Well,
town.
you know,
Exactly.
that was a place that richer people moved to. They didn't all want to stay in Scranton, which was kind of ugly and kind of gray and grimy. They didn't want to ride a streetcar that had just been vacated by the miner, and the lady puts her white dress on a seat and got coal dust all over it. That was a place, or you hear Polish or Slovak or Ukrainian or Italian. Northern Italian and Southern Italian. I don't know if there's a difference,
Right.
but that was a place that they lived
There
and they
is.
stayed out there for the most part. So now my understanding is that when the Northern Electric ran these 2-car rush hour trains, some of them actually became club cars in a sense. The same people rode them. They all got to know the crew because the crew was essentially the same. And, it's like a big party car sometimes heading out there. And so.
I think Fran is unmuted Dom. Hi, Dom.
I was called in an emergency. Oh, thank God for her. George, it was awesome. I grew up as a rail fan, hearing how well the Laurel line was constructed and how poorly the Northern Electric was constructed. And after walking the Conservancy Trail for the last 5 years, I'm still amazed at all the cuts and fills between Clark Summit and Dalton, and the massive viaduct at Ackerley, of course. I think it was probably in the upper half of interurbans in terms of the quality of the right of way, considering the terrain they had to traverse.
Yeah, the Laurel line the Laurel line's ambitions were far more grandiose. They built the line so they could carry, 40 and 50 car freight trains to steam railroad standards. Never gave any consideration to the fact the railroads didn't want to deal with them. They were already carrying the coal. And so they put a lot more money in the Northern Electric. The Northern Electric, probably if it didn't go beyond Nicholson, it probably would have been making money, I think, in the 20s. And they did put a considerable amount of money in that. I mean, it wasn't nearly as much as the Laurel line, but it was still a well-built railroad.
In a sense, the Northern Electric made the Abingtons available, as you mentioned, for people to relocate. They were members of the middle class, had single-family dwellings in the Abingtons, and they were probably among the first to purchase the flippers. And the reason they moved there in the aughts and the teens, by the 20s, they had cars.
Yeah, the Lackawanna Trail hurt it tremendously because not only could you afford a car, but you got a nice paved road. But in the earlier newspapers, if you type in Northern Electric or something, you're going to see a ton of real estate developers talking about, we're going to sell this house and it's within walking distance of the Northern Electric. And so there's the selling point. Live out here in the beautiful Abingtons and take a trolley downtown to go to work.
I'll make a comment about the fender. My grandfather's life was saved by a fender in Lower Manhattan in 1905. Before he got involved in cigars, actually the fender allowed him to become a cigar maker because he lost his cart, his leg was broken. He'd show me the scar where the fender actually hit it and dumped him into it. And as a result, he was incapacitated. And his older brother, who was in the tobacco business, named Dominic, said to him, "Tony, you're hurt bad. I'll find you something to do." And he took him to one of the shops where he sold tobacco to, and they taught him how to roll cigars. So that's how Perotti Cigar Company started, because a life was saved by a fender.
So, Dom, there should have been a trolley car on the label instead of the seal. Then that would have been more appropriate. Their logo.
It really would have been. Yeah. The seal is another story. I told it at the Historical Society, and I'll let it go at that if anybody recalls it.
All right, everybody. I think we'll wrap it up here. George, again, thank you very much thank you very much again, George, for joining us and for sharing sharing your photos with us. I think everyone enjoyed the program immensely. Please stay tuned. Our next program on July 30th will be featuring a partnership with our friends at the Everhart Museum. They'll be talking about their newest exhibit that's on display now about the American Indian schools at the turn of the century. That program will be on July 30th at 2 o'clock again. That July 30th program will also mark the end of our bi-weekly series for Lackawanna Pastimes. As we reopen the Catlin House in August, we'll be switching to a monthly format rather than every other week. We're calling them Final Fridays, so we'll be doing program the last Friday of every month. They will start in August. So as we go forward, we will post more about our upcoming schedule. But again, thank you everyone for joining us today and for joining us in all of our series that we've been doing for the last year and a half. Thank you for tuning in and have a lovely weekend, everyone.